Recording in progress.
Perfect. Keep that in. Yeah, just speak with an enthusiasm, Russell. Go on.
Excited.
Welcome to the testing PS. I'm tired. Today we're going to talk about nurturing people with my three fellow peers. Is that better, Chris? Was that louder?
I love that, and that's going to stay.
That's staying in.
You sound a bit like a teenager who's a bit upset that they've been told to do something.
Kevin and Perry.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I was going for. So well done.
Oh, there we go. 90s reference. Well hit.
Got to do an introduction. I can't remember how we introduce ourselves anymore. I've forgotten.
I'm ready to start whenever you are.
Hello, and welcome to our episode of the Testing Peers. This week we're going to talk about nurturing people. But before we do that, I want to just say a quick thank you to our sponsors, Saffron QA. I'm delighted they sponsor us. They are specialists in test recruitment, provide a range of bespoke services for recruitment in organisations across the UK. And if you want to know further details, please check out saffronqa.co.uk or look in the show notes. Today, we're going to talk about nurturing people. But before we talk about that, let's introduce the team. So let's start off with David.
Hello.
And let's meet Chris.
Hello to you.
Hello, Chris. And Simon.
Hiya.
Hi, Simon. And I'm Russell. Nice to meet you all. And let's get started.
So my thought process was that we're talking about nurturing. Talking about nurturing, what have we ever nurtured in our life? It can be children, it can be pets. Chris was mentioning that in previous podcasts, I've mentioned potatoes, and it seems to be a hot topic in general things because obviously it's the growing season. And it could be things that we nurtured and then things went wrong and perhaps something died. So my example is the fact that last year, obviously I had potatoes, they were a success. I also nurtured some broccoli and nurtured them all through last year. And I hadn't realized that they overwintered and you keep them there and they only flower in the spring of the next year. And unfortunately, after all my nurturing, they flowered, but I hadn't covered them up. So the only thing that ate them was the pigeons. So therefore, it didn't actually succeed in eating my thing that I actually nurtured. So does anyone else have any nurturing stories, either positive or negative?
I was always particularly terrible at keeping Tamagotchis alive from a nurturing perspective. I've had slightly more success with my kids so far, although that's mainly down to my wife rather than me. Never been one for gardens or anything, but pets and children seem to be okay so far.
Very good.
I'm glad to hear that.
Russell?
I've been pretty good at nurturing kind of gardens, terrible at nurturing household plants. I'm very good at killing things, everything but orchids. For some reason or other, my treat them mean, keep them keen type of tactics for orchids are working really well and they're flowering quite often. But I'm not sure that's a deliberate thing.
Very good. Chris?
I guess the closest thing I have to something that could possibly be deemed successful would be my great football manager career on the computer games, where I've managed to nurture some fine young talent within the game and got them mentors and trained up and all these sorts of things, and they've become world-beating stars. However, that's really only a world in which I've lived, and I can't really celebrate with anyone that I know, which is a bit sad. But that's the closest thing I've got, I'm afraid.
Yeah, very good. And actually, for me, apart from my broccoli, a positive nurturing story is the fact that with my kids, every birthday, I celebrate the fact that I've kept them alive for the previous year and kept them as alive, basically, for as long as I can do. And I celebrate that every year.
I guess we should also say, we're still nurturing this podcast.
True.
Over a year, nearly a year and a half now, and it's still going strong. So, we must be doing something right.
Or even as simply as we're nurturing our friendships.
Well, that as well.
Our friends.
Continues to blossom.
So from nurturing plants, kids, football managers, onto our teams. So how do we nurture and improve our teams and make them flourish the best we can?
I think to build a good team, you need to be looking at the whole process of from the moment you advertise for a position all the way through the hiring process, which I know we've talked about on previous episodes, through the onboarding, and then once they're embedded in your team as well, it's having the right practice in place to make sure that you're regularly catching up with them, you're looking after them as far as giving them good goals to work towards. You're understanding their personal development and supporting them in anything they need. And that could be anything from personal concerns or things going on outside of work to their everyday professional life, and giving them your backing. Better job you do, if and when they do leave, they'll only have positive things to say about you as a manager.
Yeah, I would say, again, culture add, not culture fit. It's allowing people to add to what you've got within your actual group and encouraging that sort of thing and making it a positive and non-judgmental group, so people can have the freedom to express their ideas and to explore their capabilities, so that you can give them encouragement. You should perhaps sometimes act as a critical friend, so encourage them, but also highlight things that you might want to improve. But if they've got the enthusiasm to actually start something, then I would certainly encourage that. And I think we discussed that in some of the other episodes as well.
I guess in some ways, we talk about nurturing teams as if we're the leader and the manager, and sometimes we might be a part of a team of managers or a type team of leaders, or our team is peers, or it's a whole strange hierarchy. And sometimes you kind of have to throw out the idea of hierarchies and just think of people first and how you relate to people, because we're all testers here, but we're also all people. We all experience things. We're all more than our roles, although the lines blur sometimes for some of us. Maybe sometimes we think being a tester is all that we are. How we model how we want to be treated, how we treat other people, and how we are a part of whatever team or community that we're a part of, that shows, models those things to people around us, and that can have a positive impact. And I guess that's not so easy remotely, but it's definitely possible.
Russell, have you got any ideas?
Many. I was just thinking of an acronym, which is why you might, anyone listening wouldn't have seen my puzzled look, but definitely had one. So I was just thinking of how to describe what I would kind of say, which is, so I've created one on the spot. See if you think of this as any good. So it's flow. So it's about feedback and appreciation, about leading by example. It's about giving opportunities, and about working together, collaboration. You do those things, you generally nurture the people around you, those with you. I think there's lots of other things on top of that, I have to admit, but I think those 4 key things, you end up nurturing the people around you to make them better.
I like that. That works. You should blog about that.
Or maybe a podcast, I don't know.
Well, yeah, maybe a podcast just on that. No, I would agree. I mean, nurturing can be anything from metaphorical arm around the shoulders to make sure, you're encouraging them when they need the encouragement. It's being the right kind of leader, the right kind of support that your team needs at that moment in time. And that could be for anything from, like I say, arm around the shoulder to actually giving them the blunt answer they need to snap them out of a funk they're in, or they just need to know the state of play, working with them to work through issues. It's just being whatever they need to support them.
It's definitely a context thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I was going to say something.
It's understanding the people,
yeah,
understanding the context of the things around them, because we all need different things. And even the way that you might want to have that support or that bluntness might not be what they need, because we are all different people.
One size doesn't fit all.
Yeah, exactly. Taking the time to understand those people and their needs, their requirements, their perceptions will ultimately benefit you and them.
An example I had in a conversation today, which was I was talking about kind of what I do to learn, to grow, to kind of build my own knowledge and things. I like podcasts. I like recording them, not listening to them. You might have heard of them anyway. And I like kind of meetups, events, conferences, and that sort of thing, reading books. But other people don't. So I was speaking to somebody today and I was talking about what do they do? And they were like, well, Stack Overflow, Git, looking at code repositories, that's what they do to learn. And you've got to figure out the different ways for different things. And one size doesn't fit all, as you say. And if I was talking to him about conferences, I would be talking a complete tangent. That wouldn't be nurturing him, that'd be nurturing me via him. So you've got to learn kind of different approaches for different people.
But also, I think the culture of the company is also a key thing as part of it. There needs to be a nurturing and listening ethos within the company. I think what we're talking about here is that it should be an employee-centric learning experience or working experience rather than the dictatorial down experience. And sometimes some companies do that, and that that doesn't encourage nurturing at all, because it can certainly quash people's ideas and people's enthusiasm, and people can become disillusioned and sort of become stuck a little bit and not know what to actually do. So it does need to be inclusive and sort of help to foster that idea that, again, what your voice is important, your ideas are important, and we will listen and we will take on board those. And you can see improvement. We can act on those and see improvement.
There is that thing as well. I mean, if you feel like you're the only one that accepts their voice is important, it's then important that you as a leader is backing them up in any scenarios where they are speaking up. And so whether you particularly agree with it or not, in that scenario, if you feel it's important and they have a voice, then it's giving them your backing, whether you're in full support of it or not in some respects. Obviously, it depends on the context. But again, it's in those scenarios, backing them up and also celebrating the successes as well, no matter how small. It's giving them the opportunities to appreciate that they've done something well and that you commend them for it and give them that pat on the back, and that recognition can go a long way to building their confidence.
But even sometimes when things go wrong, we can certainly support our group and our team and make sure that we've got their back, and then have a quiet word with them later and go, look, that wasn't the greatest example of what we were doing, so perhaps we could improve it next time. However, we don't do it in a public forum. We don't argue. We do it quietly and confidently in the background.
The foundation of a strong, accountable, trusting, respectful relationship, isn't it? It's understanding your audience, understanding where you are, and knowing the right things to say at the right time, in the right place, with the right audience. And we've touched on this a few times in the past. We will get things wrong, and ultimately we would quite like it and appreciate it if people let us know if we weren't doing things very well. Within our own little testing peers community, we have the opportunity to vent and complain about things, but we also ask for help. We also vent. We also tell people when they're doing maybe the wrong thing, or maybe we offer suggestions or those sorts of things. And that's because it's that sort of relationship and culture that we've nurtured and created, that we can get to that point. And that's quite a special thing. I don't think that's as common as I'd like it to be.
Mm-hmm. I think you're right, Chris.
You were saying about the testing peers. What we also do, and obviously projects do this, and in sprints, is retros. And I think retros are a very good thing of nurturing teams, as long as there isn't the sort of finger pointing of you did this or whatever, and it's a safe environment for things for improvement, and also hearing everybody's voice. Everyone has an idea to add to it, and the actions are then taken where necessary to actually improve. And that then fosters that sort of nurturing, that actually what you say is important, and we will listen to you and take on board what you're saying.
It's interesting, isn't it? We've talked about, in an ideal world, maybe if you were starting these things up from scratch, you could bring your own people in, you could sort of design these things. But the reality is, often you come into places that are established and have established people, and people that maybe are burnt out, or they're kind of demotivated, or they don't want to be motivated. Sometimes reading the room and learning those relationships can be more difficult than setting stuff up.
One of the things I think we struggled with going into new places is time. It seems weird, but time management. Teaching people that they've got the time, trying to give them, easy to say, look, I want to help you, look, we want to make you be better, we want to help you grow your career. But getting someone to realize that they can spend the time to do that and invest in themselves, when a culture may have been all guns, point towards kind of get it done, no time for anything. Especially when testing is compressed into sprints, those sorts of situations. It's a very hard cultural shift. To show that you're nurturing them, you've got to find ways to break that chain, to give them the time, because sometimes people find it very hard to go, no, just take less in the sprint. It's very easy for me to say that as a manager, harder to implement and do, and you've got to be there to support them, to stand in the sprint and go, actually, no, we looked at capacity and all the rest of it, we need a little bit more wiggle room, so that you can build in time to nurture people. And you've got to literally stand by people sometimes to give them that support, to show that it's okay. You don't just preach it, you demonstrate it.
Yeah, and I've done that recently. I've been trying to support multiple members of my team on their own journeys, and it is about me trying to help them carve out that time where they're still getting their work done, but they've got a spare hour or 2 hours here and there to start focusing on the next steps and what they want to do next. And we're just making sure they actually do spend that time within the work hours to do that, rather than it's down to their keenness to want to do it. But one of them's like, oh, it's all right, I'll just do it at the weekend. And I'm trying to go, no, this is not weekend stuff you should be doing. You should be spending time with your family at weekends. But at the end of the day, if they're passionate about it, they're going to do stuff out of hours anyway. But we should be encouraging them to factor that into their working day, finding that half an hour, finding that hour where they've got a lull, or they're waiting for some tests to complete, or they're waiting for something from somebody else. Then switch on to what you want to learn and build that knowledge up in other ways.
It should be because they want to do it on top of, not because they couldn't do it during.
And I think that highlights a point, is that, nurturing teams does take time. And sometimes in our busy lives, we've got meetings, we've got project deadlines and things like that. We have to give time to the people. We have to highlight that those people are important, and that we will listen and we'll take their ideas on board. It always goes back to the actual person and making them feel that they're important, or what they've said is important, and giving them time.
I guess that some of that comes from the actions, like making people feel that they're important is one thing, but actually actioning those things so that not only if you said something that's important or done these things, but it's something that it's not just you that sees them important, others see the importance and the value of the things that they're contributing to the wider group. Because for the most part, most people have got ideas and they can think for themselves, and they can read certain situations and have perspectives. Maybe they don't have the voice. Maybe they have not got confidence, or they've been knocked, or maybe just they've not had the opportunity. Who knows? And it's not just about saying, hey guys, look at this person, they can talk. It's having this environment where people are confident because they know it's safe, that they're able to talk, that it's not going to get them in trouble. And that's, we've talked about having people's back. That's one thing. But again, often it's modeling those things. It's showing that this is a space where we can do those parts. And there's no one size fits all. There's no instant fix, and it could take a long time to show that these are safe spaces. And yeah, retrospectives is a good example. Like, you change the way you do retrospectives to try and be more effective in your team. The first time you change it up, it probably won't be the most successful retrospective you'll ever have in your life. But if you keep on and you show the credibility of the things that you're trying to do, and you can give everyone a voice, you give everyone the chance to speak, whether or not you're the facilitator, you give them the time and the space, and you listen to them, then that in turn will show that what you're doing is working for everyone. It's beneficial. It's this whole team concept that we talk about sometimes with Agile and other things. And whether or not we're talking just about testers or testers and devs and BAs and other people, they are all people, and they all should be respected and included in these things.
You hit on something there, Chris, that reminded me with the retrospectives. Nurturing often is about teaching people that just because they try something the first time and it doesn't work out as well as they expect, that's not the end of the world. The first time you write an automated test, guess what? We're not great at it. The first time we pull down code, we get it wrong. The first time we do something, we're often not great. And nurturing them is about helping them see beyond that first less than perfect experience to see about the future. The fact they'll make mistakes, the fact that there's learning. And we learn a lot of the things by doing. I think, I can't remember what study it was, but I think most things we learn is by actually being actively involved in them versus by anything else. So the practice is critical. And if you can do the thing that you're trying to learn more often, and you can spot opportunities and others give you opportunities and you take them, you can help that nurturing process grow, and you'll grow your skills. The first time you do a public speech or a podcast, guess what? It may not be the most polished thing you've ever done in your life. Second time, hopefully it gets better. It could get worse, but then use that to know what to do differently. Nurturing is about making sure that the space is safe so that you can try things, you can not do great, and you can keep going. Failure isn't the first hurdle and you stop. You give people that desire, that passion, that encouragement, is probably the better word, to push and to accept the fact that those experiments will sometimes not go great.
Good metaphors with plants and things here, isn't there? Because My wife was doing stuff in the garden. She designed where different flowers were going to go. And sometimes you sort of feel like it's being strangled or it's struggling, and just moving it into a different situation, a different position, where maybe it's got more room or it's got different access to different light and all those sorts of things. Suddenly it can flourish. I've known of orchids, to our point earlier, that have basically been left to die. They've just been put on a windowsill, and all of a sudden they've sprouted. Sometimes it's just that change, a small change or a big change can suddenly really help things, because you're not always in the right place, and you can't always win in that place. You can't always affect change in that place. And a move can sometimes be the right thing for you to be nurtured and to grow. And I guess as leaders, maybe identifying people that we have around us that maybe are in the wrong place is as important as helping people succeed where they are.
I think that actually you highlight a good point there, that sometimes as leaders, we need to recognize when to step back. And actually, an orchid is a good analogy, because sometimes neglect can actually encourage people. And actually that can help someone. If we're too encouraging of, talking about families and stuff like that, then actually we can almost try and give them too much. So therefore we're supporting them too much. And actually taking a back seat or a step back and allowing them to have the freedom to have a voice, make a mistake. Again, what we said before and what Russell just said, in a safe environment, so a safe space to recognize their skills, then actually that will then allow them to flourish in the long run, because they've allowed themselves to sort of fail or have an idea. It's okay sometimes to fail, or for ideas not to fail, but as long as it's safe and people aren't judged by that failure in the long term, then actually that can certainly help in the long term.
And another analogy there is the helicopter parenting technique, isn't it? You don't want your kid to fall over. You don't want your kid to, you try and be everything to make sure that they're safe and they're doing things that they need to do. But actually, sometimes taking that step back and allowing them to explore, allowing them to make the mistakes and learning to find their feet again is crucial. And I've certainly been guilty of that in the past, where I've been encouraging them so much that I've been almost every step of the way been stood with them going, okay, this is what you need to do next. This will help you get there. And actually, I've realised that they've become reliant on me to help them get where they need to go too much. And actually, by me stepping back a bit and allowing them to go, well, go on, you just go and try that now, see how it gets on, and work out what you need to do next. Sometimes giving them the overall objective rather than just the intermittent steps, the small steps in the way, actually encourages them to try something new and to learn it and explore it and find their feet for themselves. So I definitely agree. The neglect thing is definitely an important part.
And also, actually, another thing is the fact that we shouldn't always try and make people do things the way, allow them to experiment. Just because we've done something a particular way, having a new set of eyes or a new voice on a particular topic can change the way that we see things ourselves. And actually, I would always encourage that sort of spontaneity and questioning, and to a certain extent conflict. Question and ask why this has been done the same way for 10 years. Well, if we don't know the answer, then let's perhaps try something different.
That challenge, definitely the challenge is an important part of it as well.
So we've concentrated a lot on things that are positive things on nurturing. What things can be negative on nurturing? One of my examples would be, the company itself. The company can certainly put processes in place to quash. If you think a process is certainly better, no, the people in America might be doing that. So you can't touch that process whatsoever, even though it's hindering your actual thing. So what sort of things quash the sort of nurturing or the positivity within teams?
I think one for me that sticks out like a sore thumb is both the dev and test teams. One of my previous roles were both really sort of pushing towards that DevOps process, and they were starting to learn DevOps. They were starting to see how it works, and the company decided the way to solve the DevOps problem was to put a DevOps team in place. So a team of DevOps engineers, which are effectively just infrastructure engineers, and actually that quashed all creativity and inspiration on the DevOps process, because suddenly they were told, no, that's not DevOps, this is DevOps. And it just literally went, well, we'll just go back to Scrum then. We won't do it. We will just go back to what we were doing. We're not going to bother looking at how we can evolve the process anymore. And it took months for us to actually unpick why the business did that, why they felt that was the right solution, and how we could then try and move it back forward again. Because we were progressing. We were becoming quite, within that company, we were becoming quite cutting edge in the way we were doing things. We were constantly evolving, we're constantly doing retrospectives, inspecting and adapting. And we brought the DevOps principles in, and we were really starting to work through them and build out the way of working with the pipelines and the continuous testing, et cetera, et cetera. And it just quashed it completely. Just literally almost overnight, it was like, no, we're not going to bother with that anymore.
So what was the reason, Simon? I'm curious now.
Well, without being too negative, there was a complete misunderstanding of what DevOps was. And it was that thing of someone had heard that buzzword at a conference and thought they knew what it meant. And we'll just transition all our infrastructure engineers to DevOps engineers and we solve that problem. And didn't work.
Good, I'll change the job title, everything will follow.
Yeah, exactly.
I think you're right. I think some top-down management decisions without involving people, I think is a good way to stop nurturing people. People want to be listened to and have at least feel like they're involved in decision-making. You may need to override or overrule, but it doesn't mean you can't incorporate feedback, because then you could explain far better. And sometimes there are business reasons. I'm never sure there's a business reasons to implement something like DevOps terribly, but it does happen quite often, it seems. So I think that's one thing. I think the other thing for me is just, I guess, refusal, negativity. It's quite easy to get people that just basically are no to change as managers or people around you that, I don't know, I'm going to call it institutionalized to companies. They just have accepted the way the company is. That's the comfortable life and don't want to. And if that's a leader you're working with, it can be quite soul destroying, because you might have lots of ideas as a new starter or anything else. It just kills that sort of buzz, that desire. And so it means you can often try and conform or you leave. So it stops you nurturing your skills.
It's one of those things where you can look back on your past perhaps and think, well, I know now what motivates me. And that's a lot down to what demotivated me in the past. What did lead me to leave places or want to leave places? Is that down to the lack of opportunity, lack of involvement, lack of respect? It can be any of those sorts of things that can lead to being demotivated and therefore feeling much more disconnected than I should be with the product. Or it can be bad decisions have been made on the product that you're working on. Maybe we've got some good plans for something, but it's been shipped as is. MVP suddenly becomes all it is and we move on with our lives. And any of those parts that demotivate you are what would ultimately have led me to either down tools or to want to leave. And those are things that would make me hate myself. But I think finding out what motivates people ultimately helps you find out how to nurture people. And for me, it was always, I want to be working places that want to improve, that want to do things better, and I want to be a part of that. So in situations where that hasn't been the case, that's where I have ended up looking to leave. And failure, as we've talked about, is fine, and actually it's really good, and you can learn a lot from failure that you couldn't learn from successes. I wouldn't have been able to shape my current worldview on testing and software quality without having gone through those things and tried and failed and tried and failed and tried and failed in these different places. There is positivity from negativity, is kind of the spin I'm trying to take.
I think another thing, we're coming from a place of experience, and obviously you learn things as you go through your employment life. Another thing that I think is vitally important and can be quite destructive is sort of transparency. Companies need to be transparent. They need to make sure that the communication is good. And that one of the big things that can derail sort of nurturing and fostering that sort of inclusivity and the idea thing is if in meetings, I've been in meetings before where things have been agreed and then the message that comes out is completely different to how I understood it. And that can really undermine, especially if I've spoken to people about what was agreed in a particular meeting. And then someone else comes out with something that wasn't actually agreed, that can really have a negative effect, both on me and on other people that it may well affect. So making sure that the communication channels are there all the time and that things are agreed and there isn't that assumption and the correct message comes from all levels. Because as we've said before, communication and recognizing that everyone has a voice is vitally important.
There's some furious nodding going on.
Podcast gold.
Yeah, one thing you just remind me of, I think Chris's point remind me as well, is what puts me off more than anything else is someone micromanaging me and not giving me a chance, or telling me something along the lines of, you need to do this, there's no room for you to do anything else. You're good at this, so that's you do that. And when you offer or ask if you could try something else, no. Or when someone's watching over your shoulder constantly, and said the micromanagement, that doesn't make me feel nurtured. It makes me feel kind of like a prey or sort of thing. It makes me feel kind of very vulnerable, very unsupported, very untrusted. I think those are sort of the words that come to mind. And that doesn't help. But if there was a good reason for it, if there was clear and transparent communications to David's point, there may be a purpose why you can't do something else, or there may be a reason why someone's coming close, because maybe they want to learn about what you do. There can be positive reasons why someone wants to be close to what you're doing. But if the communication is bad, it's never a positive thing.
I would agree. I mean, it's that stifling of creativity, isn't it? And it's also, if you've not been given a clear reason as to why they need you to stick with your current remit or task, because for whatever reason, it's sometimes if they communicate it and they say, look, actually, we're in a bit of a tricky spot right now. I need you just to continue doing what you're doing to the best of your ability, and then we will find opportunity to allow you to move on. That's a positive discussion. It may not be the answer you want right now, but it's a positive discussion. If it's otherwise, no, I'm not going to let you do that, I can't afford to lose you in your current capacity, then that's more of that's your problem to solve, not my career aspiration. So therefore, we need to come to some compromise. It's a tricky one, definitely a tricky one.
We could probably go on forever talking about a lot of these things, but probably we want to retain our listeners for now. But it's been a really good discussion today, and I think we're going to dive deeper into a few of those different topics in the future, and I think we should be able to get a lot of value out of those. So thank you once again, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you to our sponsors, Safran QA. Thank you to all of you for listening and for feedback that we've received. We really do appreciate it, and we're going to take all that on board and hope that we can sort of talk more about the things that are relevant to you. And please, if you do want to give us any feedback, reach out to us on our email at contactus@testingpeers.com. Find Testing Peers on most of your favorite social media sites: Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. I think some of us even have these things called rackets these days, so check that out. We also have Patreon, patreon.com/testingpeers. If you like what we're doing and you want to support us there, that would be really, really appreciated. But otherwise, thank you very much, everybody, and we'll see you again next time. We won't see you because it's a podcast, but you know what I mean.
For now, it's goodbye from the Testing Peers.
Goodbye.